All right.
All right.
Welcome to this special edition of Send Better Emails.
Oh, is it a special edition?
Yeah, I didn't run that by you before we press record, but I'm
No,
calling it
we
a
never
special...
run anything by me, to be fair. Oh.
Yeah, this is a special edition, I'm calling it, because we are going to talk about a project that you've got on the go at the moment.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Okay. Yeah, that's sort of special. I think you've already hyped it up too much, but...
Oh, sorry. I think it's good. I think it's worth hyping. Everyone needs a hype man. I can be your hype man here.
Oh, okay. Thank you. I'll take that.
It's a secret project.
Yeah.
Because it's secrets and it's... Should we just... I'll just say what it is. I'll stop hyping this up. Otherwise it's going to get hyped too much.
Please.
So we're running experiments here at the Inbox Club where we are starting and running newsletters. And we're using those newsletters to learn more, have fun writing about subjects that we want to write about, do a bunch of testing, and really kind of push boundaries when it comes to what could be done in newsletters. And we're doing that because we obviously write a lot of newsletters for a lot of clients. You know, any one month we're sending hundreds of emails. But rightly so, clients will only be happy with us testing within a certain set of parameters, right? There's only so unhinged that a client will allow us to go, quite rightly, because we're working with, they're assuming the risk and not us. So we've started a couple of different projects, and one of those we're going to talk about a little bit today. And we're going to talk a little bit about what it is, because it's interesting. And we're going to talk about, some of the things that we want to try and test with this newsletter. And then maybe down the line, we can do a part 2 where we can share some of those results.
Yeah.
We didn't talk about where we would talk about those things in this podcast, James. So I'm assuming you're happy to talk about that stuff. But
oh yeah, of course. No, we're definitely open books. And yeah, I would reiterate and say that you can't be as enthusiastic and evangelical about newsletters as we are and not start your own. And I think that's the key thing here. We're not one of those agencies that preaches about what people ought to do, but then never actually does it ourselves. We're very much wanting to have sandboxes that we can try this stuff out first. That was kind of like a bit of a humble brag / disguise promo there, which it didn't mean to sound like that. But it would be, like you say, Jamie, it would be very frivolous of us to just start telling clients what they ought to be doing if we haven't yet tried it ourselves. So and I guess the Inbox Club started as the brainchild off the side of another newsletter business that you're still running anyway, and that that has humble brag promo aside, we're an agency that started at the coalface, not in the boardroom, if that makes sense. Like that.
It's like that. I came up with that on the spot.
That was really good.
And so, we want to make sure that we're continuing to do that and that we're building different audiences. We're putting list growth into action. We are testing lots of different variables, and we are free of the restraints that are put on us because we are working on other people's behalf, and therefore they're the ones assuming the risk and not us. And so, do you want to introduce Secret Norwich?
Yeah. So it's a local newsletter, and part of the reason why I was really keen to start a local newsletter is because I've heard that they can be quite profitable. So there's definitely this is not a newsletter that will be used as a vehicle for promoting the Inbox Club necessarily. It is intended to be a revenue generator in and of its own self. So unlike some of the people listening who maybe are running a newsletter on behalf of their business in order to promote their business, what we're talking about here is a newsletter business, like a standalone. The newsletter is the business. So I've heard lots of good things about local newsletters, but also, unlike a lot of newsletters that we work on, both for clients and for ourselves, the fact that it's local gives us different opportunities that we might not have if we were promoting a conventional newsletter which has a geographically wider audience. So, for example, we would never advertise a newsletter for a client by using leaflets, but that is something theoretically that we could do with a local newsletter. So there are all of these different newsletter growth tactics that are quite unconventional, that only really work if you're running a geographically targeted newsletter, and Secret Norwich certainly is. We send it every Sunday, and the idea is that those who subscribe will get a hidden gem, like a little profile into a hidden gem in and around Norwich. So that could be a historical site, it could be a bar, really good pub that's flying under the radar. It could be a person that lived in Norwich and had a really interesting story to tell. There's all sorts of things that it might be. And so, yeah, we're two sends in. The first one got sent to nobody at all. The second one got sent to 159 subscribers, and 7 days in, we're now at, just refreshed it, and it's 188 subscribers. So it's slowly ticking up. It will be a while before we're able to monetize, although I'm very happy to talk about some of the things that we'll do in order to monetize this when the time comes, and other sort of avenues that make us excited about this newsletter.
Nice. All right, let me take it back to the top for a second. So the idea gets conceived of Secret Norwich, right? And so we say, okay, well, you say, because it was your idea, you say, okay, I want to start this newsletter. It's a local one. It's going to be about secret spots in Norwich. And I think the really interesting thing you said there, what I'm going to ask you is about first steps. Like, you have the idea, and then what do you do then is the first steps. But I think one thing I want to pick out there is you said that the first edition went to no one. And I'm going to guess that people listening to this podcast, including me right now, are thinking, well, why the hell did you send a newsletter to no one?
Yeah.
So that's that. Yeah. So talk us through those first steps. What did you do once you had the idea? What are the goals for it? So, like, how many subscribers do you want? And you talked about monetizing that. But if we're talking about a local newsletter, like, what are your goal for list growth and the number of subscribers that you want to have? And then thirdly, why did you send the newsletter to no one?
Yeah, sure. So the first thing I did was decide what platform I'm going to use to build it. And I chose Beehive. Beehive is a platform that we use for some of our clients. It's also a very good platform for newsletter businesses. So these are, standalone revenue generating newsletters that are sort of micro media companies in a sense. And Beehive was sort of built for those sorts of newsletters. So you wouldn't necessarily use Beehive if you're a business. You might do, and we do use it for some of our clients. But generally speaking, its functionality is optimized towards growing a newsletter business and creating revenue from that. They have an inbuilt ad network. They have an inbuilt referral system as well. They make it very easy for creators to monetize on there through their newsletter. So chose Beehive. To answer the third question, to kind of jump the gun a little bit, the reason why I sent the email to no one is because when you send an email on Beehive, it publishes it as an article that then sits on your newsletter's homepage as well. So whenever someone goes to the newsletter's homepage, which is secretnorwich.com, you can see beneath all of the previous sends. So it's worth contributing to that body of work, even if nobody's subscribed yet, because when you do get prospective subscribers landing on that page, they might want to have a little look at what stuff you've sent before in order to sort of gauge what to expect. So that content does not go into the ether and is lost forever. It sits there as a reference point for forevermore. I then bought a domain. Secretnorwich.com was just like an easy one. There's actually a very successful Facebook group in Norwich called Secret Norwich, so I guess it was inspired by that to some extent, but it just makes sense. And once I set up a Beehive account, connected the domain, I wrote a welcome email. That was the very first thing that I wrote. You and I have spoken about how important welcome emails are, Jamie, and I love writing a welcome email first. And actually, this was one of my hot takes on a previous podcast episode, was if you are starting a newsletter, write the welcome email as your as the first thing that you write, even before the bio of the newsletter or anything like that. Write the welcome email, because it helps you to set the tone and figure out who you are, because every good welcome email should tell the reader what they're going to expect. So it's a great exercise for you to sort of synthesize the idea for the newsletter and sort of create some wording around that that's concise. So yeah, I wrote the welcome email, set that up, and then set about writing the first bit of content.
Nice. And then you missed my second question.
Oh yeah, what was that again?
But yeah, the goal for subscribers, given that it's a local newsletter.
Yeah, I've got this notion that the ultimate goal will be as many subscribers as there are seats in Carrow Road.
Okay.
Because I feel which is I think about 28,000. I don't know, Jamie, you're there most weeks.
27, I think. So is your thinking
27.
there is if there's 27,000 people sad enough to support Norwich City Football Club, that the same amount of people might be sad enough to subscribe to your newsletter?
Exactly that. Yeah. So, if they're willing to go and watch Norwich lose every week and pay money for the privilege, there's at least that many that would subscribe to this free newsletter.
Yeah. By the way, I'm saying that as a Norwich fan and as a season ticket holder, just in case so anyone comes for me there. But yeah.
That number's quite arbitrary. And there is, I think whenever we're talking about list size, there's always a level of sort of, there's an arbitrariness about how big our list is. Really what we want to do first and foremost is be at a point where we're able to monetize. And so monetization is kind of the first big landmark for me, the first big target.
Yeah, I think we should also the monetizing thing. We'll talk about the monetizing thing in a bit, because that's interesting. So I've got two questions. But firstly, I just wanted to say about Beehive. Beehive is definitely a good platform for anyone who's starting a newsletter, because it's cost effective and it's super easy to use, and it's not very complex in terms of designing and getting a newsletter out. So even if your business is not a media business or something, Beehive is still a really great shout for just getting a newsletter started, and then get to a stage where you're like, okay, now I'm ready to move on to a platform that's got more CRM features. So I'll kind of mature onto the next level now. And then there are other platforms that are kind of similar level to Beehive, I would say, that are kind of competitors to those guys as well, which are worth checking out. So Substack is one that we don't do a lot of work in. I guess I don't. And then another one is called Kit, which is formerly ConvertKit. A similar kind of level of email marketing platform. So if we the two questions I had, the first one is, okay, so you chose the platform, you bought a domain, set up the landing page, etc., or whatever it was, and then wrote a welcome email. You published your first edition. So I think that another big question that people are going to have, okay, you said you've got 180 subscribers now. Where did those come from? What did you do to get some subscribers from day one? Because I think that is a really big barrier to entry for when people want to start newsletters and they don't have a list. And so then they resort to all kinds of spurious things like buying data or scraping data and doing dodgy stuff like that. We preach often about the merits of organically building a list, but it's slow and it requires blood, sweat, tears, and effort. So tell us a little bit about the blood, sweat, tears, and effort that you're expending in these very early stages.
Yeah. So the first thing that I always recommend to anyone when they are creating a newsletter is to use the networks that already exist, that you're already a part of. So that could be, your family WhatsApp chat. It can be the friends that you think might be interested. It could be your professional network. Maybe you've got a LinkedIn community that you're a part of, or you're part of a Slack group or something like that. So for this newsletter, because it's Norwich focused, anyone who I know who lives in Norwich, I'm telling them, subscribe to this newsletter. Oh, and if you know anyone, by the way, who you might also who might also like it, then ask them to subscribe, please. And you'll be amazed at how far that gets you. You know, we share our office with an excellent animation agency called Indigo Illusions. Lucy has lived in Norwich for ages and has loads of Norwich mates, and immediately got us like 15 subscribers just from sending out a WhatsApp. So, you know, your network is the first place to start. And I would wager that most people listening to this, if you really think innovatively about those networks, you can probably get to 100 subscribers off the back of that alone. And we are still yet to tap into our network fully, Jamie. You know, we haven't really talked about this publicly yet. But we could do LinkedIn posts about it. You know, we could post onto our Facebook profiles. You know, there's things that we could do that we haven't.
Yeah. God, please don't make me resurrect my Facebook profile, but go on.
Don't worry about it. I've never forced you to do that. Yeah, I would also just say, once you've sort of done that, once you've exhausted that first layer, then look to other communities that maybe you're not a part of. I think communities is a really good place to win newsletter subscribers, because joining a newsletter sort of is a bit like joining a community. So I think going to communities full of members who are used to the concept of what a digital online community is a really great place to start as well. So for example, subreddits are a great place. And I'd say that's where the majority of this 180 have come from so far, is the Norwich subreddit, which has about 40,000 people on it. You know, if all of them subscribe, Jamie, we'd have more than Carrow Road immediately. Unfortunately, that's never going to happen. But it could be Facebook groups. It could be, I suppose, Discords and other various communities. It depends on your niche as to where your audience are most likely to hang out. For the fantasy football newsletter, Twitter is where the biggest FPL community is. So that's where we focus most of our attention. So thinking about, okay, where do my target subscribers hang out? And what communities might they be a part of? And how can I sort of permeate those communities? You need to do it in a way that is helpful for them. I would definitely say that. So when you are promoting your newsletter, you're not just shamelessly self-promoting, you are offering value. Maybe you're sharing a piece of content and you're saying, oh, by the way, if you want to hear more, I've got a newsletter about this. You know, so it's relatively non-intrusive. And I think that's the best way to ingratiate yourselves with communities that you're not necessarily a member of.
Yeah, right. And so if we take that Reddit example, I think from memory, did you share an edition of the newsletter and then say, by the way, I write about this kind of stuff often, and you can subscribe to, in the newsletter, and you can subscribe here. Is that right?
I did. That was the first post. I then had someone ask me if they could just share it, if I could just share the newsletter directly. So I messaged the moderators of the subreddit and asked them whether I could do that, because that was, that's quite explicit self-promotion. And they confirmed that it was fine. And so I did a dedicated post to say, I've started this newsletter, by the way. And that did relatively well. And then actually today, what I've done is I've posted just a picture of the thing that I'm talking about. And then in the comments of that post, I've written about this here, by the way, if you're interested. And that's got about 10 or 15 subscribers since I posted this morning. So 3 different ways of doing it there.
Nice. That's awesome. And then, okay, so do you have plans to use other social media channels?
Yeah. So I want to use Facebook because Facebook is not a channel that I'm used to using for newsletter growth, but it's where I think a lot of the demographic I'm after here will be hanging out. So, Jamie, one thing that we've talked about in various places is using paid ads to grow your list. But it's not something that I've done for newsletters that I personally run. And so I'm really interested to try that and to really get into the A/B testing of which ads perform best, which creative really grabs attention, and what ad strategies are going to get us the most subscribers. So I think using Secret Norwich as a sandbox for paid ads on Facebook is something that I'm really keen to do. I'm also really interested in non-digital marketing for this newsletter. So I mean, I mentioned flyers earlier. That was not a joke. I actually think that could be quite interesting. And that could extend to things like posters in pubs or even beer mats, or, it could be that every time I talk about a restaurant in this newsletter, for example, I create a sticker for them to stick in their window that says, I was featured in the Secret Norwich newsletter, or whatever it might be. So these forms of marketing might be harder to track and to get proper attribution for. But I'm really interested to try like more traditional forms of marketing, stick an advert in a local newspaper and see what happens.
Yeah, I love those ideas. I always love hearing about ideas around that. But, I think you're right. It's harder to track those things, but there's something romantic about traditional media when it comes to marketing.
Definitely.
That I kind of like, maybe, there's a scope for, you said the poster idea. Well, maybe the poster is just an edition of one of the newsletters, and people can read it, or the beer mats have the little Secret Norwich facts in about the pub that they're sat in and stuff like that. And you've always loved the idea of urinal ads, so maybe you could have a little story above the urinals.
Always wanted to try them. Yeah, always wanted to try them.
Okay, cool. So let me ask you about partnerships. So I'm guessing partnerships with other Norwich businesses might be, you've hinted there at restaurants and stuff like that, but I guess there are other, I don't know, maybe tour companies, etc., that you could explore partnerships with. Is that on your horizon?
Yeah, very possibly. I think so. One thing that I really want to try and take advantage of here is that, obviously, if I'm talking about something that's a bit of a hidden gem in Norwich, and one of our clients, the Shoebox, comes to mind. The Shoebox is a fantastic not-for-profit tour company based here in Norwich. They do loads of community initiatives, etc. They have a hidden medieval street underneath their building. It's fantastic. If you're in Norwich, not that many people know about it, and it would be awesome to do a newsletter about the hidden street with the Shoebox. So using them as collaborators, where they're posting about it on their socials. So we're not only hopefully telling a new audience about the Shoebox, but also they're telling their existing audience about Secret Norwich too. Maybe it could involve an interview with the CEO of the Shoebox, for example, who gives some not publicly known facts about how it started, for example. So I think you can apply that to various different businesses, be it pubs or I did a newsletter about a big country hall near Norwich in the last edition, and that's the sort of thing that they've got an audience of 20,000 on Facebook. If they posted about the newsletter and we've been featured in this, that can be great. So yeah, you're right, Jamie. I think making those partnerships and tapping into their audience can be really interesting as well. One avenue that's not as interesting for a local newsletter is other newsletter collaborations. That's a great growth hack for most newsletters that have kind of universal appeal. If I was starting a marketing newsletter, the first thing I'd do is contact other marketing newsletters and try and build some partnerships. But for something like Norwich, there just aren't any newsletters in the city. And if they are, they're run by like the local paper, for example. So they're not necessarily going to be interested in collaboration. So that's one avenue that's usually super fruitful when it comes to acquisition that we can't use in this instance.
Nice. I've got one more question for you before we wrap up. And I said that I'd ask it earlier about monetization.
Yeah.
Do you think there is a minimum amount of subscribers before you look at monetizing your newsletter?
No, definitely not. I think it totally depends on the topic. So if you are running a newsletter about private jets and you have 100 private jet owners, that is an awesome and incredibly valuable audience for the right seller, right? A private jet vendor is going to be advertising on your newsletter, probably paying you quite a lot of money for the privilege, because private jet owners are hard to come by. The same goes for any newsletter. So I would say it depends on the total size of your audience and what portion of them you've got. I would say for Norwich, for example, once we're at that sort of 5,000 mark, monetization should be quite easy, because 5,000 is, about 5% of Norwich's city population, not including the suburbs and outskirts, etc. For any Norwich experts listening. So that's like a fairly decent portion.
Nice. Okay. Look, we'll stick the link in the show notes for this if you want to subscribe, if you're Norwich based, or if you're just a very curious foreigner.
If you're Norwich curious.
Yeah, if you're just Norwich curious. We'll stick the link in here, and we'll do an update of how this is going. I think it might be quite a little fun little series. We'll do little mini episodes down the line about how this is going.
Yeah, it will keep me accountable if nothing else.
Nice. Cool. Catch you next time.
All right. Bye.
Bye.